Most people think mythology is something primitive tribes invented before they discovered plumbing. That is incorrect. Mythology is what happens whenever humans collide with chaos and refuse to admit they are confused. Today, I'm going to show you where mythologies actually come from, why art creates religion, why religion captures politics, and why artificial intelligence is about to restart the whole cycle.
Hello, my name is Gene. I'm building a club to help people navigate our AI cultural revolution. It is Gildrum. We will master the new AI tools, support people displaced by the machine, and lead them into the cybernetic future. Our topic today is where mythologies come from and why we are about to manufacture new ones in the age of algorithms. Let's begin. Most people treat art, religion, and politics as separate departments, like offices on different floors of a bureaucratic building. One produces paintings, one handles moral paperwork, one passes laws and occasionally breaks them. In reality, they are stages of the same process. Art begins as interpretation. Religion becomes organization. Politics becomes enforcement. The confusion arises because modern society pretends these domains evolved independently. We have museums for art, seminaries for religion, and parliaments for politics. Very tidy, very modern, entirely misleading. In early societies, the poet was not a lifestyle influencer. He was an interpreter of reality. He explained storms, illness, fertility, and defeat. The symbols he created were not decorative, they were cognitive survival tools. Over time, these symbols accumulated. Someone gathered them, they arranged them, they standardized them. That was the birth of priesthood. Before there is a priest, there is an artist. Before there is an artist, there are people staring at something they do not understand. Lightning cracks the sky. A child falls ill without warning. The river floods. The crops fail. The world presents forces that refuse to explain themselves. Early humans did not begin by drafting theology. They began by feeling fear. Fear demands interpretation. Interpretation demands imagination. The first artist is not a decorator. He is an explainer. He looks at thunder and decides it has intention. He looks at the sun and decides it has personality. Chaos becomes a character. Once it has a face, it can be negotiated with. The explanation does not need to be scientifically accurate. It needs to be psychologically satisfying. If Zeus is angry, there is something one can do about it. If lightning is random, there is nothing to do but cower. People prefer gods to randomness. Gods can be appeased. The same pattern appears today. Artificial intelligence replaces workers. Markets convulse. Social hierarchies shift overnight. The explanation often comes wrapped in narrative. Greedy elites, rogue algorithms, hidden hands. When technological systems grow opaque, they feel supernatural. The average person does not understand large language models any more than an ancient farmer understood thunderstorms. Chaos demands story. Story reduces panic. Art is born where ignorance meets imagination. Before anyone writes a hymn to the sky, someone has to deal with the wolf. The warrior confronts the most obvious form of chaos: teeth, claws, rival tribes, and cold nights that do not care about poetry. He kills the predator. He fortifies the settlement. He clears the forest. The immediate threat recedes. When the valley becomes safer, life expands. Children survive longer. Food stores accumulate. Time appears. And with time comes the luxury of speculation. The region is still chaotic. Storms arrive. Disease spreads. Death remains undefeated. But the chaos is now less personal. It is not charging at the gate, it is hovering in the distance. In modern society, The warrior has not disappeared. He has changed uniform. Engineers harden infrastructure. Militaries deter invasion. Cybersecurity teams repel digital predators probing networks at 3 in the morning. Someone is always killing wolves. Yet removing immediate danger does not provide meaning. A firewall can block an intrusion. It cannot explain existence. A missile defense system can intercept a threat. It cannot interpret suffering. The warrior creates the conditions for reflection. He does not complete it. Once survival stabilizes, the unanswered questions become louder. Why does plague strike one house and spare another? Why does fortune shift without warning? Physical safety exposes metaphysical uncertainty. And into that uncertainty steps the artist, ready to narrate what the warrior cannot explain. Once the wolves are dead and the walls are standing, the questions grow teeth of their own. Why did the storm destroy one field and spare the next? Why does fever take the strongest man in the village and leave the frail one alive? Randomness is intolerable. It feels like insult layered on top of injury. The artist intervenes. He gives thunder a temperament. He gives disease an archer. Apollo fires arrows of plague. Zeus hurls lightning in irritation. Crows become omens. Spiders become teachers of patience. The world becomes populated with intentions. These stories are not childish. They are stabilizing. If illness is punishment, behavior can be adjusted. If drought is divine displeasure, ritual becomes strategy. Narrative restores agency. Symbols accompany the stories. Masks, carvings, songs repeated until memory hardens into tradition. A community does not merely believe the myth, it performs it. Today, the same impulse unfolds online. When markets crash, someone declares a villain. When artificial intelligence replaces a profession, someone assigns moral intent to code. The algorithm becomes a character in the drama. It favors some, it punishes others. It must be appeased or fought. We anthropomorphize systems because systems without faces are unbearable. At this stage, the warrior still governs through force. The myths circulate beside him. They explain the sky. They decorate the village. They soothe anxiety. But repetition accumulates power. Stories, once repeated often enough, begin to demand structure. Over time, the stories multiply. One poet says the storm god is wrathful. Another says he is fickle. A third insists he favors those who sing loudly enough. Contradictions accumulate. Rituals drift. Symbols overlap. The village becomes mythologically cluttered. Someone eventually grows tired of the chaos. He gathers the fragments. He selects which stories survive. He discards others. He standardizes the ritual. He announces which sacrifices are acceptable and which are heretical improvisations. That person becomes the first priest. The priest does not invent the gods from nothing. He organizes what artists have already produced. He arranges the symbols into hierarchy. He defines calendar, doctrine, and acceptable interpretation. Myth becomes system. System brings predictability. Predictability brings authority. The priest claims insight into cosmic mechanics. If the rains fail, he explains why. If disease spreads, he prescribes atonement. His power rests on coordination. He turns scattered imagination into structured belief. The modern parallel is not subtle. Media institutions curate narratives. Platforms decide which stories trend and which vanish. Academics codify interpretations into orthodoxy. The chaotic sprawl of online myth is filtered through gatekeepers who determine legitimacy. The priestly function is not always spiritual, it is organizational. Once myth is systematized, it begins to prescribe behavior with greater confidence. The gods are no longer loose characters in folktales. They are authorities with expectations, and expectations have consequences. Once myth is organized, it stops being entertainment and starts issuing instructions. The priest does not merely explain why lightning strikes. He explains how one ought to behave in a world governed by lightning throwing deities. Morality enters the stage. Illness is no longer an unfortunate event, it becomes a verdict. Apollo shoots his arrow because someone violated a taboo. The drought arrives because rituals were neglected. Misfortune becomes feedback. This is psychologically powerful. If suffering has a cause, it has a remedy. Sacrifice the goat, purify the temple, obey the rule. Cosmic order is restored through compliance. The moral code attaches itself to the divine narrative. To disobey the law is no longer a private matter. It is rebellion against the structure of reality. In modern society, the language shifts, but the mechanism persists. Public shaming enforces digital orthodoxy. Deviate from prevailing narratives, and reputational illness follows. The exile may not involve goats, but it does involve sacrifice. Careers stall, accounts vanish, invitations evaporate. The enforcement is social rather than celestial, but it feels just as metaphysical. Once morality is fused to cosmic explanation, power rearranges itself. The warrior who once ruled by strength must now justify himself before an unseen order. Force alone becomes insufficient. Authority requires alignment with the myth, and alignment determines who may govern.
At first, the warrior ruled because he could. He held the spear. He defended the village. He cleared the forest. Strength was sufficient justification. Then the gods entered the picture. Once moral order was tied to divine order, the warrior's authority required validation. He could no longer say, "I am strong." He had to say, "I am favored." The difference is enormous. Religion introduced a higher court of appeal. The ruler was no longer the ultimate reference point. He stood beneath something. If drought persisted, if plague spread, if omens turned sour, the populace began to wonder whether the ruler had offended the cosmic order. The myth became leverage. Priests could question kings. Kings could not easily question gods. The narrative constrained raw force. Political legitimacy shifted from muscle to alignment. The pattern remains visible today. Leaders do not rule on strength alone. They must align with prevailing narratives, moral codes, and symbolic expectations. Media storms function like divine judgment. A single viral scandal can undo years of carefully cultivated authority. The modern ruler appeases public myth as anxiously as ancient kings appeased Olympus. Power bends towards story. Story sets the boundaries of acceptable action. When a society's mythology changes, its leadership changes with it. Authority is never independent of narrative. It floats on it, and whoever shapes the narrative shapes the ceiling above power. What began as explanation becomes formation. Religion does not remain a set of answers about thunder. It becomes a mold. It shapes posture, speech, diet, marriage, burial. Ritual engraves identity into daily life. A child born into the system does not experience the myth as a theory. He experiences it as reality. Symbols surround him before he can question them. The calendar tells him when to feast. The temple tells him when to kneel. The story tells him who he is. This is not accidental. The priestly system is designed to reproduce itself. Repetition stabilizes belief. Stability builds community. Community resists deviation. Modern digital culture mirrors this process with startling speed. Online communities form around shared narratives. Memes compress entire worldviews into images and phrases. A profile picture becomes a banner. A hashtag becomes a creed. Participation becomes ritual. Posting becomes testimony. Exile becomes heresy. The mythology no longer requires marble temples. It lives inside platforms. The architecture is code rather than stone. but the psychological effect is familiar. The system molds the believer. It defines friend and enemy. It sets boundaries of permissible thought. People imagine they are browsing content. Often they are being shaped by it. Once myth reaches this stage, it no longer merely explains chaos. It manufactures order by producing a particular kind of person. And when external conditions destabilize that order, the cycle begins again. Every stable order carries within it the seeds of disruption. The ancient village mastered wolves and codified ritual. Then new tools appeared. Bronze replaced bone. Iron replaced bronze. Each technological shift scrambled hierarchies. Those who mastered the new tools rose. Those who clung to the old ones complained about decline. We are living through a similar acceleration. Artificial intelligence rewrites labor markets. Automation alters status. Social media dissolves geographic community and replaces it with algorithmic tribes. Information multiplies faster than comprehension. The result feels like instability because it is instability. The old myths were built for slower worlds. They assumed predictable careers, fixed institutions, inherited identities. Now software updates faster than theology. When understanding lags behind capability, anxiety grows. People search for explanations. Who is responsible? Who benefits? Who is to blame? The language may be technical, but the emotional structure is ancient. The algorithm becomes a spirit. The data center becomes a hidden temple. Engineers become sorcerers in hoodies. Technological systems are opaque to most people. Opaqueness invites myth. This does not mean the technology is unreal. It means comprehension is uneven. Whenever power concentrates in tools few understand, narrative fills the gap. We are not witnessing the end of myth. We are witnessing its reconfiguration around silicon. And in moments like this, roles reemerge. The warrior who secures infrastructure, the artist who interprets upheaval, and the priest who organizes meaning.
Periods of disruption compress time. Old authorities wobble. New hierarchies hunt for footing. In such moments, mythology is not a luxury. It is infrastructure. When technological change outpaces moral vocabulary, people feel unmoored. They sense power shifting, but cannot articulate why. That vacuum does not remain empty. Someone will define the story. Artificial intelligence is not merely a tool. It is a force multiplier. It amplifies productivity, yes, but also confusion. It rewrites who feels competent. It destabilizes pride built on specialized knowledge. It rewards those who adapt quickly and embarrasses those who refuse. In that environment, leadership cannot rely on nostalgia. It must translate chaos into structure. Historically, that role has required discipline, courage, and a coherent symbolic framework. Strength without narrative collapses. Narrative without strength drifts. The opportunity is obvious. Those who understand the new tools can interpret them for others. They can reduce panic by clarifying mechanics. They can prevent superstition from hijacking policy. They can build institutions suited to a cybernetic environment rather than clinging to analog assumptions. Masculine leadership in such eras is less about volume and more about steadiness. It absorbs uncertainty without theatrical despair. It treats technology neither as idol nor demon, but as instrument. Every civilization eventually retools its mythology around its dominant technologies. The question is not whether new myths will form. They will. The question is who will write them, and whether they will cultivate order or accelerate confusion. With Gildrum, this has been Gene Botkin. Until next time, remember, a grand world awaits.